Proverbs 25 tonight. Proverbs 25. As we get started tonight, I want to remind you of just a simple truth when it comes to the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. And I want us to understand as we look at the book of Proverbs, I said way back years ago when I started this series, that it's like the scaffolding that life is built around. And you can bring your life in line with that or not. But the fact is, this stuff that we learn, it's fairly straightforward, it's fairly simple, it's fairly basic, but you've just got to make a choice to say, am I going to live in line with what God has revealed or not? Am I going to do it God's way or not? I really appreciate both the name of the His Way Academy and then the name of His Way, the VBS we did this year. Because as we walk through that, the whole focus was this idea of His way, not mine. I could really embarrass Rocky by asking him to get up and lead us in the song, but I won't do that. But it's the idea of we are choosing to live it His way. And what's fascinating is as you study business books, as you work your way through even just secular studies, there's so many of those that align with the Proverbs because the Proverbs just work. They're the way the world is wired to work. And so there's a lot of people who think they're doing a gotcha. They're like, did you know Solomon got some of his wisdom from this thing in Egypt? And it's like, yeah, so? Like Solomon, his father-in-law was Pharaoh. Do you not think he had a conversation with his father-in-law and got a little bit of wisdom? And he even saw, like in Ecclesiastes, where he'll talk about, like, I searched out and I studied and I compiled lists of wisdom, and these are the things that I wrote down that are true. And so actually, we would expect that Solomon was pulling wisdom from all these sources, but he's filtering them through the lens of what is true. And even a secular source is going to have some truth to it, because if it lines up with the way God wired the world to work, it's truth. And so there are people, like I said, who are like, did you know Solomon got it from this source? And it's like, is it true? Is it the truth? Okay, then that's fine. And what God is basically doing by preserving it in Scripture for us is saying, I'm putting my stamp of approval that this is something that's in agreement. And as you study out James and Proverbs and other places, you get the idea of worldly wisdom and godly wisdom. And there's that distinction. And so what we see is this is the way to live godly. This is the way we get godly wisdom. And so what we're here in Proverbs 25, I want to come back to this simple truth, and it's the idea of a parable. Okay? Now, as we deal with this idea of a parable, little participation here. What is a parable? I know that there's a lot of definitions we could throw out, but how would you define the word parable? Rocky?
An earthly story with a heavenly meaning.
All right. It's an earthly story. So there's going to be an aspect as we deal with a parable that there is an earthly aspect to it. But the earthly is going to point us towards something heavenly. The way I would put it, to kind of go a little farther in this, a parable is basically a living object lesson. Jesus loves these. What are some of the favorite parables that Jesus pulls out as he's living on earth? What are some of those parables that Jesus they were like his go-to? They were like, his Ecclesiastes. He kind of pulls it out of his pocket. This is what you're going to hear Jesus make this reference more often than not. What are some of the ones, Martha? The seed? Yeah. So what Jesus is going to do is Jesus is going to go to farming a whole lot. And we've gone over this a lot, but I want to really drill this in. Why is he going to go to farming? What is it about farming that Jesus is looking at going, this is going to be a go-to illustration that I want you to understand? Why farming, Doug?
Society was an agricultural society. Everybody understood it.
Yeah. Everybody in society understood farming. So what Jesus is doing is he's making a memory hook that he can hang on something that you're going to see every single day. This is why Jesus is going to use illustrations like, I am the door. Okay, why would he use a door as an illustration? Because you use a door every single day. He's going to use illustrations like shepherding, because you walk along the road, look, that guy's herding a bunch of sheep. If Jesus were around today, he'd probably be referencing computers or electric light bulbs or cars. Those are the types of things, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to attach our understanding to something that we're going to see every day. Now, as you get to this point in Proverbs 25, I want us to think of what we're seeing here in Proverbs 25 as a parable. It's illustrations. They are earthly illustrations with a heavenly meaning. They are object lessons that are things every single one of us has experienced and every single one of us is going to be able to sympathize with. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to ask you this question. How many of you guys have ever broken a foot before? You stepped on something, you turned your ankle, you sprained it, you broke it. Okay, so you would understand if I were using an illustration of a broken foot, what were some of the things that you learned having a broken foot? What are some of those things, Susan?
That I have a lead foot. Like I have to step on my right foot before my left foot.
Okay. So there are now sensitive issues that come up. I've now become more sensitive in certain areas. I'm now more observant. I have a friend, and they just do these really, really mean posts. And so they did a picture, and they said, "You are now thinking about breathing." And then it's like, "Oh, I don't like you right now." Because think about it. Like, we just go through our life. We don't think about breathing until someone goes, "Hey, are you breathing?" And then you're like, I'm manually breathing now. Don't do that to me, because now you're thinking about the idea of breathing. When you have a hurt foot, what do you start noticing? Every time you put your foot down, it hurts. And so now you're having to be like a little bit more careful. Okay. What are some other things you learned when you had a broken foot, Adrian?
It affects other things.
There is a chain reaction here. All right? What you took for granted before, where you were like, I did not know that foot connected to that muscle up here in my hip, but now I do, because why is my side hurting? And what is it? It's a cascade all the way up the side of your leg, and you're going, man, now I'm overcompensating on this side. So now this side of my butt, why is my shoulder hurting? It's a broken foot. Why does it affect this shoulder over here? Okay? What else did you learn when you had a broken foot, Mike?
Extra caution.
Now think about that. When you have a broken foot, when you have a foot that's out of joint, now suddenly you just can't take it for granted that when I put my foot down, that foot's actually going to hold up and do what it's supposed to do. And the more often that foot gets damaged, the more freaked out you are about it. The more you might actually consciously be like, I am. Okay, I want us to see this, because as we go through the book of Proverbs, it's going to use a broken foot as an illustration. And these are all things that if you've ever had a broken foot, you now go, I'm a little more sensitive in this area now because of that broken foot. There's a chain reaction. This has more effect on other parts than it does just the foot. Okay, now I'm being extra cautious because I don't just trust my foot anymore. Now I'm a little more paranoid. You see what this has done is this has now said it's a parable. Let's do another one. How many of you had a broken tooth? I won't say how many broken teeth I have right now, because people would start worrying. But think about it. Have you ever had a broken tooth? What do we learn when we have a broken tooth? Now, obviously a lot of the same stuff, but what else do we start noticing?
It's hard to eat.
Easy things become hard. I just thought it was a simple matter of put food in mouth and chew. But now, every time I chew, I feel pain. I'm now more sensitive because, man, having a peanut wedged deep into your gum just feels awesome. You know? Things that used to be very easy, like, I don't know, eating a piece of fish. Now you're going, am I going to break a piece of my mouth off with that? What else do we learn when we have a broken tooth? other than the importance of a regular dentist visit. Yeah, Doug.
The pain of something so little can become so overwhelming.
Yeah. It is a little thing that now becomes big. And I'll use the word huge. All right. So you see, this is a living parable. And so let's look at Proverbs 25, because I want you to see where Proverbs 25 is now saying, hey, you remember that time you broke your foot? Hey, you remember that time? And when I broke my foot, I fell out of a tree and I landed on my ankle, and it was a wonderful feeling. It didn't hurt so much the day I did it, but like a long time later, whenever that weather starts to shift, then you're suddenly like, oh, that was the ankle I broke. And so you see there's a long-lasting consequence to some of these things. And I didn't feel it so much the moment I did it, but there was a chain reaction down the road. And so look at Proverbs 25, because, again, we're walking our way through. And so Proverbs 25, verse 17, we walked through this one last time. Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary of thee and so hate thee. Okay, so we talked through that one last time. We're going to look at verse 18 here in just a moment, because this is another set of parables. And it says, a man that bears false witness against his neighbor is like a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. Okay? Those are all military weapons that are used to bludgeon, stab, kill, whatever. And he's just saying it's kind of like being hit by all of those. Okay, so we'll come back to that in just a moment. But then look at the next one, verse 19. Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble. Well, think about this. So he says, you as a person, you're in some position of leadership, you're even in just some position where you trust somebody. And you have put your trust in this person, and you said, hey, I need you to do something for me. And the Bible says, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like what? A broken tooth and what? A foot that's out of joint. And we read this, and we go, that's funny. And then we just keep reading. But you see what we did tonight is I started before I even read the verse. And I said, I want you to understand, because maybe you've never broken a foot. So you wouldn't understand that part of it. You can imagine. But once you break a foot, you're like, oh, I understand that. That is an experiential knowledge now. If you've never broken a tooth, you may not understand the annoyance and the fact that your tongue constantly keeps going back to that spot in your mouth, and you're like, I'm playing with a hollow in my tooth. You keep the little toothpick things, and you're constantly picking stuff, and you're just like, this is annoying. I wish my teeth worked the way they were supposed to. And you think about the illustration here of the parable where it says, yeah, pretty much everyone listening to that probably had a broken tooth at some point. Probably everyone there has probably twisted an ankle. And he goes, if you have confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble, a man who you thought was going to get your back, you had a man who you thought was going to be there and doing the job he was supposed to do, and he fell through. Now, we just spent 15 minutes walking through that illustration so you'd understand what it means. What's the application? What's the application here? Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. What's the application that we can make that we need to change in our lives, or we need to be concerned about in this passage? This is written for us. This is written for us to build a framework for our lives. What do you think? What is the application, Mike?
In a time of trouble, look for a faithful man.
Yeah. So be faithful. Look for a faithful man and be a faithful man. Because again, in a time of trouble, guess what? You need a faithful man. Okay? So that's our first application. What else? Doug?
If you're to count on this kind of person in a time of trouble in your own life, they're going to end up hurting you.
They what?
They're going to end up hurting you.
Yeah. I'm just going to put it like this. Be smart. Again, it's not groundbreaking. It's not like mind-blowing, like I've never heard this before. But think about what happens a lot of times is we we talked in Sunday school this morning, at least on the Baptist side of things. I'm going to start calling it that from now on. But in the Baptist room, we were talking about the idea of Paul and Barnabas splitting up. If you look at why Paul and Barnabas split up, really what it came down to is Barnabas wanted to be a little bit more compassionate, and Paul wanted to be a little bit more, I'm not willing to trust him again. And I asked this question, I say, who was right? Who was right? Because you look at it and you say, well, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble? Mark was that. Mark was an unfaithful man in a time of trouble, and guess what Paul said? Paul was going, no, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to go break my foot again. And so Paul had a bit of wisdom to him to say, I'm not going to put my trust in an unfaithful man. We're in a war zone. I'm sorry, I just can't afford to have a loose cannon. I can't afford to have a guy who's just going to flake on us. But can you see Barnabas' point of view? What was Barnabas' point of view? So in Acts 15, when this all fell out, what was Barnabas' concern? He wanted to nurture the potential. But you understand, in order to nurture the potential, you're having to deal with someone who is not faithful. You're having to deal with the person who's going to make mistakes, sometimes the man like Mark, who walked away on them. I can understand both sides. I can understand why Paul's going, sorry, you blew it once. I just can't afford that risk. And you can understand why Barnabas would go, he's my relative, and I will do what I can to care for him. And Barnabas was willing, and you saw that with Paul. Barnabas was willing to take some risks, but it probably hurt Barnabas a good amount. And that's just something we've got to understand. It's not saying never ever trust someone who failed. It's just saying you've got to be ready because that might be a broken tooth for you. That's just something you're going to have to live with. Is that something you're willing to live with? And God gives some of us that personality that can really reach out and really work with people who fail us. But you can understand both sides. Okay? So our application so far is we personally need to be a faithful man. We need to be smart about the people that we trust, because there are times where you have to say, I'm sorry, you're an unfaithful man. Okay? What else? Dave?
For me, what that means is when I'm going through trials and troubles, our confidence is in the Lord. We should look to God and not to man for help, because people disappoint us.
So I want us to land on this one. Because again, humanity will fail. It's just the truth of it. We're going to have our bad days. We're going to have our days where we didn't do what we were supposed to. We're going to have our days when we snap. We've all done that. This is where the beauty of forgiveness comes in. And so Mark 14, Lord willing, where we'll go in a few weeks, all the disciples walk away on Christ. Every single one of the disciples shows themselves to basically be a coward. Did Christ give up on them? No. In fact, the only one that doesn't receive forgiveness is Judas. But you'll notice, it was prophesied to be this way, but Judas, the reason he never really receives forgiveness or anything, he never asks for it. He never asks for forgiveness. He goes out and that is the second time today. He goes out, and what does he do? He kills himself before he can ask for forgiveness. Every other disciple turned on Christ too. And so I just want us to understand, like Judas did the betrayal, he did the selling him, he did the extra bad one, if you will. But Peter, he denied him 3 times. All the other ones turned and fled. Some of them followed afar off. The only one that seemed to have been anywhere close, nearby, was John. But that's because he seemed to have some connections and he could get his way in. But what does Jesus do? He makes a point to go to each one of those and restore them to fellowship, and he shows his faithfulness. He's willing to take the broken foot. He's willing to take the broken tooth. And so as we look at this, our job is to be faithful ourselves. I can't stress this enough, actually, because there is a level of, there are people who I have known, there's people who have worked for me, that I know this is a person I have to follow up with 2 or 3 times on to make sure they're actually on board. There's others, I can just turn them loose and I know that they're going to be on time, they're going to do the job they're supposed to do. Anyone who's run a business, you've had that. There's certain people I know, I'm not going to send him out because I know he can't control himself. He's a loose cannon. Oh, he's going to freak out. This guy, and I know that. And so what happens is then I have to start taking on more responsibilities myself because I can't assume this guy's going to do it on his own. But if you've ever run a business or a crew and you had that one guy that you just know is faithful, you know that guy, you don't have to follow up with him, he just does his work. There's just something about that guy that you're like, I'm going to do what I can to hold on to you. You need to be faithful. You need to be mindful about the business you're doing. But again, you're smart in saying, I'm not going to put full trust in a guy who's not trustworthy. But I'm going to see the potential and I'm going to try to grow them. And at the end of the day, I look to God to be the one who's actually going to take care of me. Okay? So that's that one. Questions on that? Or follow-ups? Any other applications that we can learn from that passage? Okay? So what we're doing on these evenings is we're walking through a Bible study to show you how to do it, and then hopefully you can do it yourself. And what you're doing is you're basically looking, you're saying the illustration given was broken foot, tooth out of joint. What are those like? And you notice I just unpacked the whole study just based on what those things feel like. Let's do another one. Okay, and we'll end on this. All right? Look at the previous verse. It says, a man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. Okay, we understand probably, unless you're really into medieval warfare, you probably understand what two of those things are. You understand a sword, you understand a sharp arrow. Okay? When I was at camp, we had the field tip, like hunting arrows, and they had the razor edge to them. And when I was using those, and I plan to use those for a summer, you have to deal with those things completely different than just a practice tip. A practice tip arrow just has kind of a blunt tip to it. It's pretty harmless. I mean, I'm sure you could still get it through someone if you pulled hard enough. But they really, like when it comes down to it, it's in the thing. You just put your hand right here and you just pull straight out. You're fine. Don't have to worry about cutting yourself. Don't have to worry about doing anything. But man, you get some of those special hunting arrows with their razor blade tips, and guess what? You're not putting your hand up against the target and pulling out like this. Because guess what happens? It opens up your hand. You need a special target for it because it destroys your target. You can't just shoot it at paper and all that. Like these special arrowheads that you use for hunting are meant to cut. They're meant to destroy. They're meant to pierce. Whereas a practice arrow, I mean, it's made to shoot through foam and paper, and you're like, oh no. It's meant to, practice arrows are just what they sound like. They're meant to practice with. But if you're out in warfare, you're not putting a dull little arrowhead on your bow. What are you putting on your bow? Sharp razor blades or a sharp arrowhead. You're putting something there that from a distance I can lodge in deep and I can do damage. And that's medieval warfare. Because again, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to defeat you from afar. It's basically the gun of its day, and I'm trying to take you out from a distance. And so when the Bible says this, you think about this, that a man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is what? He's like a sharp arrow. He's sniping someone from a distance. He's taking them down from afar. There's a bit, if you will, I'm not saying that everyone who shoots a gun is this, but there's a bit of a cowardliness to this. Because again, I don't even have to be face to face with you. I can just take you out from a distance. And it lodges in deep, and it hurts coming out, and it does more damage on its way out than it did on its way in. So again, you see, we don't shoot a whole lot of arrows nowadays. But back then, guess what their standard military weapon would have been? An arrow. So nowadays, it would have been a shotgun, or a sniper rifle, or a pistol. It's a long-range weapon that's meant to take you out from afar. And so again, it's me saying, I'm not even going to go face-to-face with you. I'm just going to take you out from a distance. But then think about a sword. What's a sword do? It cuts you. Okay? And so with both of these, there's the aspect of it cuts, it hurts, it slices. Okay? I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that's where the handshake originated from because it's where they kept their weapon, and it's showing that I don't have a weapon in my hand. But remember the story of Eglon with the really, really big fat king? It makes a huge deal that he was left-handed because guess where his weapon's going to be? On the other hip. And so they can check and be like, he has no weapons on him. And it's like, I hit it on the other hip. And so what's he doing? He's got a blade hidden. He pulls that blade out, and what's he do with it? He takes out the king with it. It's this, I just slice, I take you out. But what's a maul? When we deal with this idea, and yeah, you might have used one in cooking. We don't use them so much in military engagements anymore. But what's a maul, Adri?
It's like something you beat with.
It's a beating hammer, all right? So you think like a war hammer or a little like club that you're just going to bop someone over the head with. I got some lady in my neighborhood. I don't know why. She walks around with a bat in her hand, and she's ready. She's got her dog and she's got her bat. That is the closest equivalent we would understand to what a maul is, all right? They just walk around. And guess what happens if you mess with that lady? You're going to get a Louisville Slugger upside the face, and she's going to go for the home run with your teeth, and then it fits in the other illustration. All right? What is something, if the maul is being applied to your face, what is going to happen? It's not a cut. It's not a sniper's arrow. What is it? It's like being punched. It's like I'm being beat down. All right? So you understand, if you lie about me, if you betray me in that way, it's like I've been what? I've been beat down. It's like I've been stabbed. We use the illustration. You stab me in the back. I've been stabbed. What do you do that with? A sword, a dagger, some bladed weapon that I'm right up close with you. But then also there are times where when somebody lies about us from a distance, and we don't even have the chance to defend ourselves, and that arrow just hits you, and you go, what was that all about? And I've had that happen to me various times in my life where someone said something, and you're going, where did that come from? And you're like, I didn't even have a chance to put a shield up. I didn't have a chance to do anything. It was like I was just sniped from afar. At least the guy who stabs me has the decency to be right in my face about it, and I can maybe get a hit off, something. The guy who's going to hit me with a maul, maybe I have a chance to dodge or deflect no, but a guy who shoots an arrow at me, I'm like, I got nothing. So you see the parable here. And look what it says. It says that a man that bears false witness against his what? His neighbor. You're making up a lie about someone you should be defending. You're making up a lie against someone who you should have their back. They're your neighbor. But you're lying about them. And we saw this in the case of Ahab. What happens with the case of Ahab? He really wants Naboth's vineyard. And so guess what happens? They get some guys in the neighborhood to make up a fake story, and guess what happens to Naboth? He gets put to death for it. Of all people that should have come to Naboth's defense would be his own neighbors that should have known better. But guess what? When money's involved, or pride's involved, or other things, sometimes it's easy just to lie and take advantage of the situation. Application. We understand the illustration. Hopefully we remember it now. So let's go to the A, application. What are some applications? So these are the applications of the broken foot, broken tooth illustration. Be faithful, be smart, look to God. But what is this one? When it comes to lying about your neighbor.
Super careful about your facts if you're going to do somebody.
All right. So there are times where we've lied about someone and we didn't even realize we were lying. We didn't have all the facts. We didn't have the full story. We were operating on the best of my knowledge, and the best of my knowledge proved to not be too good. Okay? But we have to understand the damage is already done. You've heard the illustration with gossip. It's like the boy who ripped open a feather pillow and blew all the feathers off into the wind. And then his parents said, all right, go collect all those feathers back up. You're never going to find all those feathers. And that's the idea. When we hear a story, when we hear something about someone, that's why the Bible keeps saying, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. It's really easy when we want to believe something about someone, especially if we already kind of don't like them. It's going to be that much easier to say, no, I'm going to believe what they said because I want to believe what they said. And he goes, better be careful. Make sure you got 2 or 3 witnesses on that one. That's how justice is established. Don't be the guy who goes, did you hear the story? I don't know if it's sure or not, but I'm just going to shake this feather pillow to the wind and I'll collect the feathers back up if I turn out to be wrong. No, you won't get those back. So you need to make sure that you're not that neighbor who's firing pot shots at his... Because again, to go back to the story of Ahab, remember the story of Ahab? There was a guy who fired an arrow on a whim. I just happened to shoot the arrow just right, and guess what happened? It just landed in the perfect spot and took Ahab out. Your words might have just done that to a person. You might have just fired that arrow willy-nilly. We've all seen that with gunfire, where it's just that random stray bullet that just takes someone out, and you go, I didn't mean to. It's like, well, they're still dead. I don't know if you realize that. You don't get the option to go, I didn't mean it. And that's why he uses the illustration of an arrow, because he's saying, if you fired a random arrow out your window into a crowd of people, it's just as destructive as randomly lying about your neighbor. Okay? So that's application number one. Okay? We're factual. We make sure that we have the actual truth. Adrian?
So you just alluded to mine without completely saying it, that your words or your lies actually can be as hurtful as physical pain.
Yep. And I'm going to say physically harmful. We understand, like, it's not like they're physically damaging you, but it's the equivalent of it. And it's like, well, I meant well. It's like, it doesn't matter what you meant. You know, if a car accidentally runs over me or intentionally runs over me, the car ran over me either way. I'm still equally hurt. I don't care what your intention was. So we've got to be careful with our wording. And that's where, again, it says, a man that beareth false witness against his neighbor. It doesn't say he meant well, meant evil. It just means whatever story he was sharing was false. This is the damage it can do. Okay? Tabby? I remember when we were at camp, we had this rule that basically was, you need to take the story to someone who can do something about it. Because a lot of people, guys gossip as a prayer request. And it's that, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? We just need to pray for them because they just did such and such. And you're going, if you didn't start that sentence with, we need to pray for them, and you were just, did you hear about what so-and-so did? That sure would be gossip, but now it's a prayer request. I don't know how to take that. No, like, that's still gossip. And so again, it's the wisdom to say, do I share this or not? Because again, you might not have all the facts. You might actually be dealing with an untruth. And guess what? Like a feather pillow being ripped open in the wind, you don't get the chance to go around to everybody who's gossiped to everybody and go, actually, I got that information wrong. Let me take that back. Nope, feather's already out there. You know, you squeeze that toothpaste tube out, you don't get to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Hey, we've got to think about our words like that. We don't get the option to take them back. So that word goes out of your mouth. That story leaves the confines of your head. Someone's getting beat up about it. Someone's getting stabbed. That arrow's going out. Make sure it's targeted. When I learned how to teach archery, one of the things that this course prided itself on is there had been no injuries with this course at all. In the hundreds of schools involved in it, in all of the hours of tournaments, no one had ever injured themselves in this course. So I determined I needed to change. No, I'm just kidding. But what did they do? They had rules, and I mean, the rules were restrictive like crazy. Like they had special whistles, and you didn't touch anything until you heard the second whistle, and you didn't pick up an arrow unless you heard the third whistle, and you all pulled the arrow back at the same time, and you all fired at an exact target, and then you didn't do anything, and then you put your arrow. I mean, there was like rigorous restriction. You know what? Because of that rigorous restriction, nobody got hurt. And you're shooting arrows. Somebody's going to do something stupid with an arrow. Like that's just kind of normal operating procedure with people. Someone's going to do something dumb. But they had such a rigorous method that they said, we're not letting anyone get hurt doing this. Imagine if we had that method with our words, that we said, I'm not going to share any of this unless I'm 100% sure. Imagine how many people would not be hurt by words. Because again, and that's why he uses the illustration of an arrow.
I was taught growing up, and I try to teach our children the same principle, that before you speak your words, you can pass over 3 bridges. If they can't pass over all 3 bridges, you shouldn't say them. And the 3 bridges are, is it kind?
And so again, you see the illustrations here. It's using the illustration of an arrow, using the illustration of a sword, using the illustration of a mallet. None of those should be used accidentally. None of those should be used just to get clout to myself. Every single one of those should be used after careful training, careful aim, and very, very surgical precision. That old lady that walks down the streets of my neighborhood with a baseball bat, she's not doing this the whole time as she walks. But you can bet she knows how to use it, and she knows exactly where to apply force when necessary. So she keeps that thing at her side, she keeps it put away, and if somebody messes with her, I'm sure the first reaction when you wave to her and say hi, she's not going, bah! She goes, I'm going to make sure this guy's a threat, make sure it's absolutely essential that I use this. Then, as a last recourse. But again, the power of the word. Okay? Any last comments on that? Randy?
These are truths and truths that are, I believe, most often adhered to by people who know God,
Mhm.
desire to follow in His will. I believe as time has gone on and people have moved further away from that, what we see in reality in society is that people are far from functioning in
Mhm.
this
Yep.
space of truth. Meaning that there is no, there are more often than not bridges in people's lives,
Yeah.
if I may say. And I mention that because I think sometimes in this space we can get into a place where we believe everyone else is guarding themselves by
Mhm.
bridges,
Yep. Yep.
and they absolutely are not. As a matter of fact, most folks are looking for the shortest route there, and that probably doesn't include a bridge at all.
Yeah.
And so, in that space, I guess what I really want to drive home is the idea that I continue to believe that it is proper for us to have the bridges to cross over, but I also believe we need to be wise
Mhm.
that most around us are not taking that same path.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult, it can be disruptive, it can be harmful, it can be hurtful,
Yep. Yep.
even though you're properly going across the bridges.
Yeah. And so this is where, spoiler alert, this is where the two verses come together. So this is right here. So we have, these are the guardrails we have to put in. We have to live by these whether other people are living by them or not. We understand other people are not going to live by these. There's a lot of times in my life I've gone, this is what's going on in my head, and this is what would be going on in my head if I just said that. I don't know that anything was going on inside that person's head when they said that. So that's why I need to just filter that and go, I'm not going to take that personally, because I think they were just speaking stupidly. But here's where these two verses come together. Because we are going to live in a fallen world. We're going to live in a world that hates us. We're going to live in a world that does not live by the same standards we do. And I think that's just being wise to say, I'm living in a way that pleases the Lord. They're living in a way that shortcuts. It's worldly wisdom versus heavenly wisdom. Worldly wisdom works for a short time, and I'm going to watch all these people around me living by worldly wisdom and getting ahead, and I'm going, I really want to go after that, but the Bible says, do not walk in their ways. And so, if I can put these two verses together, here's the thing. The challenge to us, because we know people aren't going to live this way, is we live faithfully. We are responsible before God to live the way He's asked us to live. So we do not return railing for railing. We do not return lies for lies. The Bible actually tells us to put to death those things on earth, and it's bitterness and railing and clamor and evil speaking. Why? Because, just like you pointed out, we're going to have people doing that to us, and we're going to be so tempted to go back at them with the same fervor they hit us with. And the Bible just says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So he asks us to be faithful, but he also asks us to be smart. The Bible says, as much as lieth in you, if it be possible, live peaceably with all men. Why does he say that? It's not going to be possible to live peaceably with all men. There are some people who just want to kill you. They want to destroy you. He's not saying, stay there and let them kill you. He says, don't avenge yourself. But he doesn't say, sit there and just suck it up. No, you can get out of there. In fact, there's a situation in the epistles where he says, hey, you've got a married couple. The wife is saved, the husband isn't, and the husband wants out of it. He says, as a married woman, as a Christian, if that spouse wants to leave, you can let them leave. What's the whole point of that? He's saying you don't have to fight and be like, I feel so terrible because they're leaving the marriage. He goes, no, they're an unbeliever. They're not living the same way you are. If they want to leave, you have the right to say, okay, you can go. And so that's this idea. We have that freedom to say, I don't have to put myself in a situation that is going to lead to abuse. I can walk away because there's no way for us to live peaceably. Now, we don't take that into our own hands to avenge ourselves. We just basically walk away, or we let them walk away. Okay? And then the final point, which we already laid out, and so we kind of come right back around to it, is we look to God. We look to God to be the strength that we need, and that's why God says, don't avenge yourselves. Why? Because I'm God, I will repay. And that's where he says, pray for those that despitefully use you. That's a really, really hard verse if you stop and actually think about it. There's people who have taken advantage of you. Like in the New Testament, it says they joyfully accepted the spoiling of their goods. Somebody pillaged your house and you went, hey, glory to God. What? But we've got to put ourselves in that thing of saying, we're living for eternity, we're living for what will glorify God long term, and we're letting him make up the difference. All right? Any final thoughts on that? That's been really good. David?
Two more guardrails that help me a lot in two verses with this subject is, first, the Bible says that we're going to have to give an account for every idle word.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary verse to me, that every idle word that we say, we have to give an account to God. We recognize that fact. That's going to give us a lot more discretion to keep our mouth shut, not to say things we shouldn't say. And then another verse my dad taught me growing up is in the Proverbs that helps me a lot is the Bible says a fool uttereth all his mind, the wise man holds it until afterwards. That verse is a big help to me.
Bear with me. And I know it's become a joke, but I know you guys mean it well. A passage that has changed my heart substantially on this matter. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 20. Ecclesiastes 7:20 says this, for there is not a just man on earth that doeth good and sinneth not. Okay? That hits you right between the eyes right off the bat. And then he says this, he said, also, take no heed to all the words that are spoken, lest you hear thy servant curse thee. That verse tells us people are going to say things around us that they didn't intend, and we're going to hear them say things they didn't mean to say, and we've just got to be careful we don't read into what people said. Take no thought to all the words that are spoken, lest you hear your servant curse thee. There were times when I ran the escape room, I intentionally would not listen to the security footage as I was watching what was going on around, because I did not want to hear what people said about me. Because there's times where things are said, and I don't want to come into the middle of a conversation and overhear someone saying something, because I don't know the full context. And I don't want to read in, and I don't want to judge them for what they said when I was not supposed to be listening in. Well, I could listen in because I was the boss, but you know what I mean. But verse 22 is where it really hit home for me. And I want to tie it in with the idle words and the patience here. Look what it says. For oftentimes thine own heart also knoweth that thou thyself hast cursed others. Think about what that verse just said. It says, there's not a just man on earth that doesn't sin. So you're a sinner too. You're going to hear people say things they did not mean to say. Don't think too much about it. But also, you know full well you've done your share of gossiping, backbiting, bad-mouthing, so you're guilty of it too. And that's what Solomon is saying here. He just says, yeah, just think about that, because there's going to be times where you said something and you really didn't want someone to take that out of context. And there's times where, even if they took it in context, that was a pretty bad thing to say. Now, again, I'm not saying that's every single time, but it's a powerful illustration that I think we need to keep in mind with using our tongue. Okay, Mike, you had your hand raised too?
Well, my thought was is that, these are offensive weapons, and words can be used offensively, but we're warned to have the full armor of God on as a protection.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was just thinking from
Yep.
that, there is a way to deflect some of those.
Yeah. And the wounds still hurt. Yeah.
When the truth comes out, you want to be held, you want to be found
Yeah.
correct. That people go, no, that's not the story that I heard about you is not correct.
So take, for instance, one of the qualifications of an elder. The qualifications of an elder is above reproach. Why? Because the elder is going to have people saying all sorts of things about him. I mean, I think about the things that I've heard just in passing that people have accused me of, and I go, what on earth? Where'd that come from? Okay? But if you know me, and you know some of the things that I've done, you could go, that doesn't seem to match his character. Or it now says, you know what? Actually, let's open that record book, because I actually think you could be guilty of that. You see what so that's where we live in such a way that these things can't stick. And if they do start to stick, if I do a little bit more digging, I can go, no, you're innocent of that. And that's why David in Psalm 119 from this morning could say, I'm not ashamed, because I'm doing things God's way. You can say all the bad stuff you want about me. You know I'm doing things God's way. And I don't have to live in shame, because I've got my armor on. And it does protect us as well. So, all right, we've gone a little bit later. Any final comments? That have been really good. We've tied those two together. Serge?
I think about the side effects. What will happen afterwards? Say, with lying about the neighbor. Do I really want an enemy next door or a friend next door?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just the practical, like the pragmatic side of things. It's, be careful what you say. Personally, this is why I don't hold grudges. It doesn't mean the hurt isn't still there. It doesn't mean that when I see that person, I don't feel that little sting in my chest to go like, but I don't hold a grudge. You know why? Because that person might realize what they've done and they might come back around, and I don't want to have burned a bridge. And so that's why personally, and that it's not the most comfortable decision, as you can imagine. But and sometimes I've seen that, where a person that really hurt me or lied about me or offended me, whatever, and then we make things right and we're friends. And we're friends again. I gesture too much. All right. But yeah, I there we go. Okay. Well, we're going to call that there. Mike, can I get you to close us in prayer, and we'll be dismissed.